would not, right? So then we're saying, is this a neurodevelopmental disease along with a muscular disease? And I advocate and argue that it is. And if we look at it that way, right, then a lot of the things that people experience, we could say like, oh yeah, they're all very similar, kind of on a spectrum, right? So the Duchenne spectrum of behavior, I think, is how we need to be thinking about this, because we do, and we are seeing some very real shared experiences, as you all know. And so what those are things like learning difficulties, right? So generalizing learning across environment, across context, as well as specific learning problems, or applying things that they know really well in one context to a novel situation to solve a problem, right? So that learning does not generalize as learn concepts outside of that context. We see a lot of executive function deficits, particularly with attention and attentional control, and that ability to naturally suppress background information. So this is that concept is like, if any of you until right now have not noticed that you can hear cars in the background of your apartment or your home, or if there's a fan going that you weren't paying attention to until I just asked you to, that's because your brain is doing its job and it's saying like, oh, we're in this setting, you're focused on this thing and we're safe, so you don't need to know these things. And it kind of suppresses them for you, right? So that you have an easier time focusing. That doesn't happen for these boys. So the environments are very, very overwhelming for them often. Information processing and memory tends to be kind of impacted, but they have unique information processing abilities, right? So they really do struggle from a direct learning standpoint. They might need a lot of learning opportunities to learn a math concept, something that takes video spatial and sort of kind of that like rule cover, like this. But then you're like driving down the road and they'll be like, hey, remember that time on Tuesday on January 16th? And you said that thing and like grandma did this, and you're like, what? That was like 7 years ago. How do you remember that? So they actually have really, really, really good memory and recall abilities for certain things when those things are learned in the right context, when they are not kind of being negatively impacted as they are by the world and how Duchenne interacts with the world. We see those sleep difficulties, right? So there is some very real, very minuscule data that we are hoping to expand upon here in the next several years that does kind of implicate dystrophin having a role in sleep and sleep wave function. And so a lot of the boys have sleep dysfunction, and a lot of not only from a breathing standpoint, right? Like the impact of breathing on sleep as they age, but even as littler kids, you can see some really problematic sleep dysfunction that we see enough of it, right? And it's experienced so commonly that we would be amiss to not study that under the lens of Duchenne to a degree. And when we do that, what we see is there's something going on here that could be very, very concerning and very, very important, right? But that we don't really have a good treatment for yet. And so remembering how important sleep is for all of us as humans, and for these boys in particular, that automatically, like even if these other things weren't true, them just having sleep dysfunction would be huge. We see a lot of not having good tolerance for distressing events or aversive stimulus, right? Like clean socks or harsh noises like toilets and other things, hair dryers, those types of things, other tactile things, certain lights, that kind of stuff. So imagine the school setting for these boys. A lot of difficulty transitioning from one task to a next. We see those as I talk about them affectionately, those like rage-like meltdowns we see at times, seeming out of the blue or related to something small often. We see a higher rate of selective mutism than you would anticipate or would be predicted based on how prevalent selective mutism is in the normative population. I'm going to make sense of that hopefully later as well. I see a lot of hyperfocus, especially during preferred activities. We see that perseveration or getting stuck in those thought loops, right? So it's like the example I use all the time because it's super common for some reason is parents are like, hey, we're going to grandma's on Tuesday. And then for the foreseeable future until Tuesday, you're going to grandma's. That kid is like, when are we going to grandma's? When are we going to grandma's? When are we going to, like, even though you just told them 50 times, they're going to keep coming back and be like, when are we going to grandma's? And so it's that getting in that future thought loop about things in the future. And then we see that OCD-like behavior. And this usually tends to come out as like ordering and aligning, a lot of like ways they like things that are very particular in their immediate environment, or in things that are like preferred activities, and they'll do like list making, right? Like they'll list all of their favorite monster trucks and then all of the secondary monster trucks. And so they kind of go through these like rote patterns, right, of like listing. Those are kind of the most common areas I see it play out.